didn't expect you guys to listen so quickly.
You should be a teacher.
Yeah. Are we live?
Live.
All right. Well then, I would like to call this meeting to order. If you are willing and able, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance. Roll call vote, please. Roll call attendance, please.
Weinbrenner.
Here.
Wendell.
Here.
Ryan.
Here.
Haskala.
Here.
Cole. Here. Heyer.
Here.
Brandon.
Here, we have a quorum. Welcome to the Village of Holly. And tonight, we're going to start off with a presentation. We will be awarding Lifetime Achievement Awards. It's called the Key to the Village. And this key serves as a symbol of appreciation for the nominee's dedication and service to this community. This honorific stems from an ancient tradition that symbolizes the recipient's freedom to enter and leave their medieval cities and villages as they please. And while the Village of Holly is not medieval, we try, we award this key to the nominee as a trusted friend of the village residents. And I am going to start off with Thomas McKinney. It is with deep regret that I inform you that Thomas McKinney passed away at 4:30 this morning. Gordy Dreyer, John Wingelmeyer, and Buster Weinbrenner nominated Tom for a Key to the Village. Tom's years in service to the Village of Holly as president set a standard. His exemplary service left a mark and a legacy that will not soon be forgotten. Mr. Walker intended to present this key to Mr. McKinney, but he is not here. So if we can, I had asked John Wingelmeyer if he would accept on his behalf, please, just for the sake of the ceremony.
Certainly. So, John, I know that you were good friends with Tom. Tom is going to be a missed, loved person from the community. So, we present this to you on behalf of the McKinney family, on behalf of the village council and the village. Thank you.
This key will be taken to Gordy Dreyer, who will host it near Tom's casket in the upcoming days. Can we please have a moment of silence? Next, I would like to present to Debbie Musgrave. Jerry Walker, Debbie Bigger, and Buster Weinbrenner nominated Debbie Musgrave for a Key to the Village. Debbie's years in service as councilwoman and president pro tem are what the heart of true volunteerism looks like. Debbie Bigger, will you please accept this key on behalf of Debbie Musgrave as a symbol of the trust that she has earned from our village?
I will accept on her behalf.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Musgrave had an emergency at her home and was unable to make it, and sends her regards. Now, on to John Hanson. If you would approach the podium, please. Now, I feel like this man needs no introduction. I nominated John Hanson for this Lifetime Achievement Award. Rain or shine, Postman John delivers smiles day after day and has done so for 29 years. I know I am not the only one who believed he should be recognized for his lifetime of service. I once told him how loved he was by everyone in the community, and he said, "I love everyone, and you know, April, I just reflect back what I receive." That's a very typical John response. We are fortunate to have you, Mr. Hanson, so please accept this key as a symbol of the trust you have earned from our village.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. If it's okay, my good friend Kristen would like to say a word on my behalf because I get nervous in front of people. So, and she's the only one that said she'd say exactly what I wrote for her to say. So go ahead, Kristen. I know you wanted to say something.
Well, I am not nervous to talk in front of people, as most people know. So, John, I just want to say this. So, a year ago, I have had the privilege of living across the street from the post office. So, I see John almost every day, mail or no mail. And I met him 7 years ago, and I know many of you have known him longer than me. But he's so special to me, and he first brought up this idea about the key to the city probably about a year ago in a conversation we had out, and I'm in my pajamas in front of my yard. And I'm so glad to see it come to fruition, and what I shared with him was, it is so typical of John to come up with an idea that is going to bless people for years to come. And the post office is so important for communication, and our postal workers, to me, are frontline people. They're making sure you get your bills, your granddaughter's card, your money, if you're getting money, you know, the things that mean things to you. And all of that is so important, but more importantly than his actual job and service is that John has a special gift where he walks in the room and the energy changes. And if you've been in the coffee shop and he's come in, or you've had one encounter with him, you will leave better than he found you. And that is a God-given gift that can't be taught. And so many dark days I've run into you, and you've changed that, you've brightened it. And I know that so many people would say that about you. So thank you for your service, but also thank you for what you give to this community outside of the mail, because that matters more to us. And we love you, so.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for what you give to me. Again, I only reflect back what you give me. Thank you. Thanks, Joe.
Okay, we have one more award to give away today, and this is a plaque to honor Mr. Richard Kinnaman and his years of service. Now, I know this isn't a key to the village, but Mr. Kinnaman served on this council. Mr. Kinnaman served on this council for so many.
So Richard, at the end of each councilman's term, it's our honor to award to each councilman a plaque for their service. Richard served 6 years actually on council and continues his public service today as he was elected to the Holly Township Board of Trustees. So this is a little late in coming in that you did not change seats from the council during normal election. So Richard, on behalf of the Village Council, the Village of Holly, and all the residents, thank you for your service, and we deeply appreciate it.
And it did feel like forever and ever and ever.
Well, thank you for all that you taught us, Richard. Okay, let us take a break because I'm quite certain that this many people are not here to listen to us ramble on about some of our tedious
April,
line items.
Genesis Credit Union, are they not here?
Oh, they are, but I figured we could cut through
Oh, okay.
those that wanted to skip out and not hear all of our stuff could go ahead and skip out or mingle for a minute. Let's take a 10-minute break. We'll meet back at 6:15. Welcome back to the Village of Holly regular meeting, and we are going to kick this off with a presentation from Genesis Credit Union and Alter Designs.
Good evening, Council. So I'm Tim Colbeck with Main Street, Oakland County, and we're the administrators of the grant program. But the grant program would not at all be possible without a partnership with Genesis Credit Union. And we've been doing this now since 2018. It's specific to supporting small businesses. We were really happy to do this again, and if you want to talk about the actual application or the nomination, I'll let you. Thank you.
She has to take that to the ATM.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
That's how it gets,
So we got that record.
that's how it gets cashed. Yeah, so we actually get applications from all across Oakland County, and there's a panel of judges, but what we look for is the business setting themselves up to succeed, or is this just a one little project and maybe we'll survive and maybe we won't? And the application that we got from Alter Design, we knew that she knew what she was doing, she's gonna be fine, and she's got great things on the future. So we're happy to give her this check for $1,500.
Thank you so much. I'm super appreciative. All right, thank you so much for that. Okay, next, all items listed under consent agenda are considered to be routine and non-controversial by the village council and will be approved by one motion. There will be no separate discussion. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and discussed separately immediately after consent agenda approval in its normal sequence on the regular agenda. Council.
I have a adjustment to make to number 6. It does say consideration approval of resolution 2025-001 confirming the village president's appointment of Hillary Algrad to the village of Holly. They forgot out the DDA part, so I'd like to amend that to say the DDA part.
Okay.
I'll second.
So, are you making a motion to approve consent agenda with the amendment?
Yes.
And you have, and Cascella has a second. Roll call vote, please.
Ryan,
Yes.
Koskela,
Yes.
Weinbrenner,
Yes.
Cole,
Yes.
Kyer,
Yes.
Wendell,
Yes.
Brandon.
Yes, motion carried. Public comment. Members of the public can address council once recognized by the chairperson. Comments are limited to a maximum of 4 minutes for items not on the agenda. Council may extend this time by up to an additional 4 minutes by a majority vote. For items on the agenda, comments may be made after council discussion, prior to council vote. Prior to addressing council, members of the public shall state their name and address for the record. Is there any public comment? I see one in the back. If you can approach the podium, please, and state your name and address for the record.
Hi, Tim Taylor, 105 Second Street. I just want to bring up the traffic for the middle school. I understand, like, the schools had to cancel bus routes and, you know, unforeseen circumstances there, but the traffic there has gotten overly bad to say. It's, like for today, for example, you know, the weather was bad this morning, snow and ice. Traffic at 7:40 in the morning when school starts was backed up all the way to Beacon and Bridge. And cars, they were passing on the shoulder. You know, there was a handful, like, not a lot, but there was a handful, and it's a safety concern. You know, it's not just the morning, it's in the afternoon too. It's not just for the traffic safety, it's also for the kids, because there's a bunch of kids walking and all that. You see them at McDonald's, trying to cross to and from, up until at the school. And just want to bring it up as just, you know, something should or could be done there. I know there's usually an officer parked across the street from the driveway to try to do like a scare tactic, I guess, maybe, or whatnot, but like, I don't know if there's something that could be done or whatnot. Just want to bring it up as just, you know, we just got 2-lane roads all the way up, but, you know, our roads really aren't meant to handle that kind of traffic. And with the weather we've been having, people passing on the shoulder trying to get through, it's a real safety concern.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Any other public comment?
I get to stand on this side for once. Richard Kinnaman, 4145, something, somewhere on Stonebridge.
You better put the timer on.
4151 Stonebridge. I am here on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce. As you know, the Holly Area Chamber has expanded to be North Oakland Regional Chambers Association with Holly Area Chamber and the Ortonville Area Chamber as divisions. And I handed out to each of you an invitation for the annual dinner that we have coming up a week from Saturday. Deadline is this Friday to get stuff in, to get a reservation turned in. This is a really wonderful event. We have usually averaged about 100 people. It is held at Venue 111. As a member of our chamber, they treat our members well, and guests. So I would like to invite all of you as council to purchase tickets to come. You may purchase at member rates. We will allow that. I do have some other forms if anyone from the community is interested in attending. We have changed our awards a little bit for this year. Being a regional chamber association, we have focused our awards more on businesses and our member businesses throughout all of our divisions. And so we will have some different awards. And so if you attend this one, you are actually attending the first annual North Oakland Regional Chambers Association annual dinner. As well, I would like to invite everyone to our breakfast at the end of the month on the 31st, 7:30 in the morning at Villagers. We will have our new village manager and new clerk treasurer will be there to wow you, as if they haven't been already in some ways. So those are two great chamber events coming up, and we would like to see everybody join us. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Is there any further public comment? Kristen?
Kristen Watt, 102 South First Street, number 3. I was looking at the agenda, so I'm hoping I'm not stepping out of bounds to say something here, or if there was opportunity later. But I just wanted to take a quick moment because I was just confirmed that this is Debbie and Jerry's last official council meeting. And I just wanted to say we have not always seen eye to eye early on, but I have worked with both of you personally, professionally, and sat through many, many hours of these meetings over the last few years, and I just want to thank you both for all that you have done for this village, and for me, for every person that's sat on this council, because Welcome, Tim. It's a thankless job and a lot of stress. And I just told Debbie, I said, I think, how are you going to sleep at night? She goes, I don't know. And I was like, just because the amount of things that we argue about, complain about, come up with positive things to say, the countless hours that I can't even imagine that go into the devil and the details behind all of just what we talk about here is a lot. And I know, at least for Debbie, Jerry, I'm sure you've worked super late too, but I know for a fact there have been times I've gotten emails from Debbie at 10 o'clock at night in response to me, and thank you for always responding. And I just appreciate you both, so thank you.
Jerry and Debbie. Any further public comment? Okay. Old business, none. We have none. We have new business. We have the consideration of the acceptance, the FY 23-24 audit report. Mr. Walker?
Yes, thank you. So each year, Plant Moran provides the audit services for the village. They have for several years, and they have always done an excellent job. In conjunction with our request for you to receive and accept the report, Ms. Hill and her team give a brief overview of the budget, but they're also prepared to answer any questions you may have.
All right. Well, thank you very much. My name is Pam Hill, audit partner with Plant Moran. Have with me here tonight Chris Gilbert, senior manager, and Hannah Hodgkinson, who was the senior, on the audit this year. So we are here to just briefly cover the results of the audit for the June 30, 2024 fiscal year end. Did want to just say thank you as well to Jerry and Debbie. There's a lot that goes into the audit every year, a lot of communication throughout the year, which I think helps the audit to be a lot more efficient. And we've just really, really appreciated the professionalism that we've received, and we've really had the pleasure of working with you both. So wish you both good luck in your retirement, and thank you for everything.
Thank you.
So with that, you should have in your packet the financial statements and the end of audit letter. And then we passed out to you when we got here just a brief slide presentation, which we're trying to get up on screen. But if anyone in the audience really wants, I do have extra copies with me, so just let me know. It does not seem to be working. I said, definitely doesn't seem to plug in. All right, well, we're just going to keep going with that. Like I said, I have copies. Anyone really want them? So we'll just keep rolling here. I know you have had a long agenda, so we did want to cover the results, like I said, of the audit, and the graphs kind of show a couple-year trend here, so we'll go through some highlights. We know there's several new people on council, so happy to take any questions now, or we can also work with management. I know in the past, we've come out and done some presentations, like on a Saturday or whatever, to talk about budget and financial statements in a little bit more detail than what we can typically cover in a quick presentation. So we can work with Tim on that. And so I'm going to turn it over to Hannah. She's going to start us off on the graphs, slide number 1.
Real quick, before you begin, may I have a presentation?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we're just on page number 1 here for the general fund revenue. I'm just gonna give like a high-level overview of general fund revenue, expenses, and fund balance. So this first page here just goes over the past 3 years for the general fund revenue. And we can see that this year, for fiscal year '24, that revenue is about $5.2 million rounded up. And this is about a $1 million increase from the prior year. And I would just point out that like the two largest revenue streams here are the property taxes and the intergovernmental revenue section. And just to comment further, like on property taxes, this is relatively stable from year after year. As we can see, the increase of the property taxes, which is like the light blue box on the graph there, only increased about 126,000 from prior year to this fiscal year 2024. And this was just due to the increase in the taxable value from the village, not any increase in millage rates or any of that. And then the second, well, I guess the largest increase in revenue was the intergovernmental portion of things. And we can kind of see like this dark orange bar here that it's at 2.2 million this year. And this was about around $1 million increase from the prior year to 2024. And usually intergov makes up like state shared revenue and then federal and state grant funding. And then also to point out, like the state and federal grants can vary from year to year for the village. It all depends like what the village receives during the year, which I'm sure you are all aware of during your board meetings and all that, council meetings. And then the largest increase I would like to note here for 2024 would be the MERS pension plan grant that the village has received. And this was about $1.2 million in general fund revenue. And it was also required that the village book the revenue and expense for this grant funding. So that's why we see like the increase in revenue in 2024. And then also just to like kind of go backwards on things too, in 2024 and 2023, we also have an increase in the intergovernmental revenue section. And this would just be because of the ARPA monies that the Village of Holly has received, and then they spent that on eligible ARPA expenses.
And maybe just really quick, and
yeah.
for those of you who don't know what the MERS pension funding is, the state provided grants to all local units who were below a certain funding percentage, and the village qualified for that revenue. So that's kind of what Hannah's talking about, and we will get in future slides, we'll talk a little bit about the pension costs and retiree health care costs and kind of what those look like for the village.
Perfect, thanks Pam. So then we will move on to the next slide. Well, I guess the next page. This goes through the general fund expenses for fiscal year 24. And again, we see the 3 years here. We see 2024, 2023, and 2022. And for 2024, it looks like the expenses for the year were about 5.8 million, which I would say was a significant increase from the prior year to this year. And the main driver of this increase in expenses is again going to be the MERS pension plan grant, because again, they had to recognize the revenue in fiscal year 24 and the expense. So that's why you see the increase there. And also, just to note, it was an increase for each department because that grant funding had to be allocated by department. So that's why we see like the increase in all the bars of the colors. So like general government, other, public works, public safety, because it was evenly allocated proportionally throughout those departments. And then I would say that there was also an increase just due to like the capital projects that happened at the village this year. So like the office renovation and then the Cyclone Park project. So that's why we see just an increase of expenses for fiscal year 24. And then the next slide, or next page, talks about fund balance. And again, a 3-year graph here. And just to like kind of overall describe fund balance, it is broken out in 3 different categories. So like the first category is committed, and these are funds that have restrictions based on the authority by council. And then we also have an assigned category that these funds are that the village has set aside for a specific purpose, which currently includes like the sidewalks, the mill pond, and just a few other items. And then we also have an unassigned portion as well. And these are just available, spendable funds that are left after considering the committed funds and the assigned funds. And just to point out in your packets as well, like, we did group together assigned and unassigned in the blue box there. And this is just because, like, the assigned category is a little more flexible and it can kind of be reallocated as priorities change and all that. So that's why we can combine it on this graph here with unassigned. And then just an overall key takeaway of this whole graph would just be that the fund balance has decreased at about $800,000 from the prior year. And this would just be because of the additional capital costs and just a couple other things that affected the general fund during the fiscal year.
So if I can just touch just briefly too on fund balance, and just so, for some of you who are newer on council, fund balance is sort of the equivalent of like a savings account, right? So it is important to continue to monitor your fund balance. That's something that you'll get into as you get into the budget season and start talking about your budget for the next fiscal year. It's important to keep in mind fund balance and ensuring, one, that you're not dipping into fund balance for operational purposes. One-time projects, those types of things are typically what we see, but you want to make sure that you're operating to the good, right? So that you can continue to operate. So something important to consider, the decrease, while some of it was planned and budgeted for, you were over budget. I think it was over $200,000, which did then reduce fund balance even further. So it is important as you continue forward to continue to monitor that fund balance. Usually, we look at fund balance as a percentage of expenditures. Your expenditures are, as Hannah pointed out, kind of off this year because they're overinflated with the pension expense, this one-time item that's in there that's not going to be recurring. But if you were just to kind of look at it on a, annual basis, it'd be about, 20, 30% or so. So I think that's a stable amount, but you do need to just be careful as emergencies come up, things like that. We know you have a lot of capital that you need to do as the village continues to age. So just to continue to monitor that and kind of keep that top of mind as you head into budget season. With that, turn it over to Chris.
All right, so I will be covering the sewer and water fund and pension and OPEB liabilities over the next several slides. So I am on slide 5 for the sewer fund. So similar to the last few slides, we're looking at a 3-year trend analysis just for comparison purposes here. So total operating revenue for the sewer fund in fiscal year 24 was just about 1.9 million, or just shy of 1.9 million. So right in line with the last couple of years, as you can see here. And then in the orange box, you'll see is operating expenses. Total operating expenses was just about 2.1 million in fiscal year 2024, which has also been pretty consistent with the last couple of years. So as you'll see here, the sewer fund has been operating at a loss the past handful of years. In fiscal year 2024, it was about a $250,000 loss. The operating loss was nearly double back in 2021, just for comparison purposes. So that gap has closed somewhat, but still in 2024, it's operating at a loss. So I do want to caveat that this is taking into consideration only true operating revenues and expenses to evaluate the sustainability of this fund. Sewer and water funds are meant to be self-sustaining, so when you look at your true operating and revenue and expenses, you can see if the users of the system are covering the cost of actually operating the system. So, so as a result, it's not taking into consideration any grants you might have received in the sewer fund, or more specifically your debt service charge, which is really revenue generated specifically to pay off the bonds that were used to finance capital purchases. What you'll also, so that's why you'll see here, you might see, you get an operating loss, but then you have this black line in the middle here that's going up, which is really your unrestricted net position. So when you add back in some of those non-operating revenues, that's why net position went up in this fund. So the unrestricted net position which is the amount of net position when you back out the fund's net investment in your infrastructure, is what's left over. And that amount was about 2.8 million at the end of fiscal year 2024. So big picture, this number is just something to keep an eye on over time. Based on operations, this appears to be a stable amount of net position, but it's just important to note that this could easily get used up as future capital costs come up, as you have capital needs and as other needs arise. So it's just important to keep a good, strong balance here. And then I'm going to turn it over to the water fund on the next slide. So similar concept here with looking at the last 3 years. So total operating revenue for the water fund was about 1.2 million, which is consistent with the past few years for the water fund specifically. I will note, so water gallons pumped and billed in 2024 did decrease a little bit from 2023. It's more in line with 2022. So decreased water usage is really the main driver of why operating expenses decreased from between 23 and 2024, which went down to about 1.4 million in 2024. So similar to the sewer fund, the water fund has also been operating at a loss over the past handful of years. It was about 200,000 in fiscal year 2024 for the operating loss. So that's, again, come down over the last couple of years, but it's still, the system's still operating at a loss. And again, similar to sewer, this is only considering true operating revenues and expenditures, so it's not including any grants or that debt service charge that you have. And then once again, the black line in the middle here is your unrestricted net position, which was at about 3.6 million for fiscal year 2024. So similar to sewer, this is a stable amount of net position, but again, could easily get used up as capital needs arise. So for both of these funds, it's just important to monitor them over time, where you're at year over year, just really to help, and they're really good to evaluate, to do this analysis and evaluate if enough revenue is being brought in to run the systems, as well as setting aside money for future capital needs that may arise.
Yeah, and I think,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna add I think that definitely the thing to watch, as Chris pointed out, is every one of these years, the expenses were more than the revenue. So it is important to watch that trend, and I know Brian's gonna be speaking next, talking a little bit about the water and sewer rate, so he can get kind of into that detail, I think, a little bit more. We'll finish up with our legacy costs.
All right, last slide. So pension and OPEB. So like many other municipalities, the village has two major employee benefit obligations. So we'll start with the one on the left, your pension plan, which is at MERS. And so total assets at the plan were about 10.8 million in fiscal year 2024 compared to a total liability of 18 million. So you're right at 60% funded, which, as Hannah mentioned a little earlier, you had that MERS pension grant, which went to all municipalities or entities basically the goal was to get you to the 60% funded, which has happened obviously, and that's compared to you were at 45% funded in the previous year. So kind of looking at how that's changed and taking into account that MERS pension grant, along with the fact that the village has been making additional contributions in the last several years, and that's helped to get this to where it's at now. So I did want to mention too that it's just important to understand that this is really a snapshot at a point in time. So you're currently right at the funded percent that the state wants you at for pension at 60%. And when looking at OPEB, so this plan, the total assets in this plan are 330,000 compared to a total liability of 340,000. So the OPEB plan, or retiree healthcare, is actually 97% funded. And I believe it was 2 years ago where this was 65% funded, and the village did amend the plan to close it only to a specific group. So certain divisions and employees were actually bought out and moved to a healthcare savings plan. And that is one of the main drivers that helped to significantly reduce your liability to get you to this 97% funded, which is quite honestly well above where the threshold the state wants you at, but it's in better shape than many other municipalities that we see as well in terms of your percentage funded. So any questions? I know that was a lot of information in a short amount of time. So any questions on anything we've covered?
Yes, on page 4, this budget depletion was around the 700,000 marker over the course of the last year, leaving us at right around 800,000. Is this depletion heading in the same direction over the course of the next year? Are we going to be at around zero a year from today? Or are some of these assets going to be paid off?
So, I don't believe and maybe Debbie, you would know better. I believe that the last budget that was adopted by council for fiscal year 25 that you're in right now was budgeted to the good. Would that be accurate?
Yes.
So as long as you stay within budget, then that should not be the course.
Council?
No, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam President. So are we discussing just this or the entire report as well?
That's up to you. I was gonna just briefly cover a couple things in this shorter end of audit letter. But if you had something larger or anything additional on any of the numbers, we could cover that really quick.
Okay, so,
Yes.
I guess I have a few questions here. So, let's say you're sitting in our position here. What's one thing you're gonna look for that would stick out to you that we should be looking for? Or
So-
something that we should check in on to make sure it's,
Yeah, so that's a good question. I mean, I think that continuing to monitor the budget that the village has set is important, right? Because I think as the council president pointed out, obviously you can't afford to continue to come in that much over budget. There's variables as well. I mean, capital projects are a big piece of that, and kind of the timing and when they fall oftentimes does have an implication of, if they're budgeted in 1 year versus when they're spent, so that can have an impact. So I would say, continuing to monitor the budget to make sure that you're on track with what the council originally adopted. You do want to ensure that your fund balance doesn't fall much below kind of like that 20-25% of your expenditures from an operational perspective. So that would definitely be an area of focus as you continue throughout the fiscal year.
so just, we'll work through that. So for instance, would that be a question I would just ask here in the meeting, for instance, how is our budget looking?
Yeah, so typically, and Debbie, I don't know if you want to answer this, but that information would come from management. And so they can provide budget to actual statements that can be used at council meetings to kind of go through the details of where you're at in terms of the originally adopted budget and where you're at to date.
I have to imagine it's in there, but it's,
Those are provided quarterly to council.
numbers.
Well, and we'll have, like, say if we're going to spend more on a project than what we had budgeted for, we would have to do budget amendments, which would come before, so then you would know, hey, we're going $15,000 or $200,000, whatever,
Right.
over what we've already budgeted for. It's just like your house budget,
In all of your larger construction projects, those items would all be brought to council to be approved before they were to move forward. So that's another kind of checks and balance that you would have as council.
Amber?
April?
Oh, I thought you had a question.
No, I didn't.
No, I get down here.
Well, because I went to,
Cloture president, that's why.
Council, any more questions for Plant Moran?
I have one actually.
Mr. Wendell?
You did say that we were over budget by $200,000 for 2024?
So, let me double check the number, because I don't want to.
I might have misheard it, but.
So in total, you had originally passed a budget for 2024 where you were adding to fund balance of about $11,000. Then you amended the budget, or council amended the budget to where you were using about $429,000 of fund balance for various capital projects, et cetera. And you ended up the year using about $664,000 of fund balance. So that was a combination of revenues coming in more and expenses coming in more, but again, some of that is the pension grant activity that's kind of in both spots.
That's what I was curious, because I heard that top, and then look at the next page and look what that's.
So from the amended budget, yeah, you were, spent more than the amended budget by about 235,000,
Gotcha, all right.
kind of net, if that's easy.
Council? Jim?
Thank you. So if we're going to the packet now, I have questions on that before you sit.
Yes, yeah, go
Okay,
ahead.
perfect. So I think there may be a mistake on page 26. It says there is no liability for unpaid accumulated sick leave since the village does not have a policy to pay any amounts when employees separate from service to the village. So in our contract we're discussing tonight for our village manager,
Jim, point of order, which paragraph is this on page 26?
First paragraph.
Thank you.
first paragraph, second sentence.
See it, thanks.
Okay. So looking over our village manager's contract, we do pay out 50%. So I don't know if that impacts anything.
No, that should not impact anything, but we can take a look at that sentence for next year and just make sure that it's appropriately adjusted if need be.
And one other item, Madam President.
Go ahead.
So on page 51, under pension information, can you talk about all those adjustments that were made? I just don't understand what they're, why do we keep having that over and over again?
Yeah, so, so you're referring to the change in assumptions?
Correct, yes.
Okay, so, the pension liability, is basically one big guess, right? It's one big assumption. It's based on an actuarial valuation. The actuary is hired through MERS, which is who administers your pension plan. So unfortunately, the village really doesn't have much say in what those assumptions are. That is governed by the MERS board as they work with the actuary to determine the assumptions related to the overall MERS plan. There's hundreds of communities within the state that are part of that plan. That being said, the standards would require them to take a look at various things. The biggest one that changes almost every year is the rate of return that's being used. As you know, markets fluctuate and they look at kind of, it could change by 0.1% and they'll still adjust the valuation. So it is required to be disclosed, any changes in those assumptions, even if they're super minor. And the actuary is required to review those assumptions and make those changes as well. So yeah, unfortunately, there's probably going to be little tweaks here and there. There's always updates to mortality tables. You know, either people start living longer or whatever it is. And so they try to update those assumptions as often as possible to try to get to as close to an accurate number as you possibly could.
Okay, perfect.
Yep. Good question.
Council?
One more.
Costello?
Thank you, Madam President.
I love this. This is great.
You mentioned in our single point of failure that one person can do everything. They can make.
Yes, I was going to get to that, so yes, go ahead.
Well, if you're going to get to it, the floor.
All right, I will just briefly touch on that, because I did want to go through the end of audit letter. So that's the one that's only 8 pages, so I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I definitely did want to cover a couple key pieces within the end of audit letter. And so section 1, which is on page 2, does talk about a few findings that we had as a part of the audit process. So this year, there were some new auditing standards that came into play that did require us to take an even deeper dive into the internal controls related to financial reporting, and really required us to look at user access within the system. So we did do a deeper dive within that. This segregation of duties finding has been similar for the last several years, and we know we've worked with management to try to implement some additional controls. Due to the small office, sometimes that can be hard to fully segregate all of these controls. But yes, so there was a finding just related to some of the access within the IT system, and one individual currently being able to add new vendors, initiate wire transfers, approve wire transfers, open bank accounts, adjust the general ledger, payroll, et cetera. And so we do have some recommendations in here related to further reviewing that segregation of duties. And I know that was something we had talked about, both with management and council, that once kind of the new team came into place, we had a lot of really good brainstorming discussions with the draft of this around how others in the office could be utilized to potentially help to mitigate some of these risks. But definitely recognize that it is a challenge, just given the smaller office. So anytime you can limit that and have somebody performing a review of the person who's actually doing the work, and that person who's doing the review doesn't have access to make all of those changes, that's always really beneficial. And I know Mr. Walker has taken on a lot of that review in his position because he doesn't have access to make journal entries and probably would never want to. And, different things like that within the system. So I know the village has done a lot, but there are definitely still some gaps in the internal control structure. Did you want to talk about that one? Did you have a specific question?
My question, I guess, was, could it be insubordinate? Be that person that checks over stuff, or would it have to be someone on equal footing, or how does that?
So the main key, great question. So the key is really what their access is to. So we would not want someone who has the ability to make pay rate changes being somebody who's reviewing the payroll, because they could go and override it once it was done, right? So it's not necessarily about the position of that individual at the village. It's more about what their access and ability is to do within the system, if that helps.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And then we did have a couple other items as well, just related to the bank reconciliations. So it is typically the village's practice to perform the bank reconciliations within 45 days. Due to various circumstances at the village this year, they were not performed timely. They were ultimately all performed, and we did test those reconciliations, and there were not any issues. But because bank reconciliations is a very important internal control, we bring it to your attention as something that, going forward, just ensuring the timeliness and accuracy of those, as well as the proper review of those. And then lastly, we did have one last item just related to some journal entries that were identified during the audit process to record some additional accounts payable, make sure that the expenses are booked within the right period of when the services were performed, and then ensuring that the revenue was also properly recorded in the right period. So that comment really is mainly related to items that only happen at year end. So all of your typical recording of your expenses and revenue has been appropriately happening throughout the year. It's the year-end accrual piece and kind of that cutoff piece where we had a couple entries that were identified during the audit process. And then the second section of the letter, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but just maybe for some of the newer members of council, before the audit starts, what we do is we usually sit down with the village president, and then we may just randomly pick different council members every year, and we'll kind of talk through what our audit process is, what our plan for the audit is, and then we send a follow-up letter to the entire council that talks about what our plan is. And basically, section 2 is kind of the follow-up to that letter. Did we follow the plan as we laid out to council? And if not, why? And basically, this letter says we followed our plan and we did not deviate from that plan. And then lastly, section 3 is a lot of stuff. But I would say it's really a lot of more informational items. So as you have time to read through those, we're happy to answer questions. I'm sure management's happy to answer any questions that you might have related to any of those items. But just kind of updating you on new legislation, new accounting standards that the village will have to follow, et cetera. So again, happy to take any questions on really anything that we covered either in the letter or anything else that we talked about this evening.
Council. Amber, sorry, I just want to say your.
No, I think to piggyback on what Jim was saying, especially when it comes to these reconciliations, again, I think better cross-training of our individuals and staff would probably prevent that. Because it sounds like we've got one person that was kind of doing it, and sometimes if they're away, it doesn't get done.
Shannon?
I do think this is a great time to go in and relook at it. We all have fresh faces, right? And that's a time when you can sit down and look in your office situation and maybe redelegate certain jobs and things so that we can be with. Because I think it's a great catch. It is something that people should be, I mean, just to be responsible, we should have more checks and balances like that. And everybody doesn't get the same IT controls.
Thank you so much for your presentation and your time, as always.
Thank you all.
I will entertain a motion to accept the consideration of the acceptance of the FY 2023-2024 audit report.
I will make a motion to accept the fiscal year 2023-2024 audit report.
I'll second.
Motion by Kyer, second by Ryan. Council discussion. Council?
Let's not buy any more fire trucks or buildings, guys.
That's not fair.
Yeah, the fire department was just saying that they really need, sorry guys.
Need it, though.
Okay, if there's no further discussion from council, public comment. Seeing none. Please approach the podium, state your name and address for the record.
My first name is Amy, last name is Ray, 108 College Street. And this is just a question. I don't think there can be Q&A between comments from the general public. I don't think that can happen, but I had heard, I don't know the extent of this. I'm thinking that the internal operations budget for the village, that there are different appropriations, and that if you go over that, then request or emergency request for funding has to happen. And I would think that that doesn't happen necessarily at these meetings all the time. I had heard that like the pipes burst in this building, for example, and that there was flooding. And so knowing that there's an overage, I really don't know if that overage is just this general overage or if that cost was covered in an emergency budget, you know, an operations budget. I'm just trying to learn this as a kind of as a resident, and I haven't heard at all any talk about any cost related to the pipes being frozen and bursting and flooding in the building. And I'm just wondering if that was covered off, or is that something that needs discussion? I don't know the answer to that. I just wanted to bring that up. Thanks.
I made a note to discuss both that and Tim Taylor's comments in the end, just so that both Amy and Mr. Taylor are aware. Any further public comment? Okay, for real this time, hearing none, seeing none. Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Weinbrenner.
Yes.
Cascola.
Yes.
Kyer.
Yes.
Wendell.
Yes.
Ryan.
Yes.
Cole. Yes. Brandon.
Yes, motion carried. New business item number 2. Acceptance. Consideration of the acceptance of a water and sewer rate study. Mr. Walker?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. So we have with us tonight Mr. Brian Kamler, also from Plant Moran, but from a different division. And so Mr. Kamler assists the village as needed, really throughout the year, every year a little bit. But every 3 to 5 years, we try to bring him in to do a more comprehensive water and sewer rate study. This study was approved by council previously. And so that's what he's here to present tonight. It takes into account, and he'll discuss a little bit, some future infrastructure needs So in the prior presentation by Plant Moran, they talked about future expenses and how infrastructure repair or improvements could impact the budget. This is really some of what Mr. Kamler will talk about tonight in a scenario. And so what he will talk about is the debt service charge, which is that base charge which is used to fund the bonds, which really are infrastructure type repairs or purchases, as well as the monthly usage rate or the commodity rate for water and sewer. And that commodity rate is the actual usage that each household or business uses. If they use 1,000 gallons of water, then naturally 1,000 gallons of sewer must be treated, and there's a cost associated with each of those. Brian.
All right, thank you very much. I sat through theirs. You think they'd sit through mine? No, so they get to talk about the accounting, and there's a lot of rules in accounting. There's a lot fewer rules in setting of utility rates. It's much more of an art than a science. But as Jerry mentioned, we've been doing the same study or redoing it with updated information every year, every other year, probably for the last decade or so. So we're not suggesting any philosophical change to what you're doing. It's more of a how much do we have to pull each of the levers in order to continue bringing in enough cash that we can pay our bills on time, pay for those future debt service payments, pay for any capital projects that have to happen that won't be covered by the bond issue, and at the same time, maintain a certain amount of cash in the bank in case something breaks, the oops, we have a broken water pipe, we have a broken water main, or some other piece of equipment fails. At the same time, our customers don't pay us, the village, as fast as we pay our vendors. There's a little bit of a lag there. So we have to have so much money in the bank to maintain our ability to pay. And so in the model, what it does is it takes into account all the ins and the outs that we expect, as well as spreading it out over 5 years. And at the end of 5 years, we want to make sure that we have X amount in the bank, and there's a formula for that. Now, the slide deck that is, I learned my lesson, I'm not going to try to get it on screen, and I'm not going to go through all 20 pages of it. But it basically works out to 9th grade algebra. If you remember 9th grade algebra, we were solving for X. You knew all of these other items. We have an estimate of how many units we're going to sell. We know what our payroll costs are. We know what our debt service payments are. And so those are fixed. The variable is how much do we charge per unit. And so all the model is a fancy Excel file that does 9th grade algebra. So we get the assumptions from management and some other things are just industry standards. And then we plug those in. We cover the assumptions that wages will go up X percent and utilities at the plant will go up Y percent every year. And so we throw all of that into this formula, and it spits out what we should be charging if all of that holds true. Now, we know all of it won't hold true. There will be changes, and that's why we do this every couple years, even though it's a 5-year model. We don't want to just set it and forget it for 5 years and come back and see how we did. It's a living, breathing tool that's part of every budget cycle. Where are we at compared to what the model said? Maybe we have to tweak certain assumptions. Things went better than we thought, so maybe something can be reduced. So at the end of the day, after we've done all this and we've factored in the 17 million of new bonds that are going to be issued, the rate increase on the variable rate is actually very slight. For water, it's actually 0. We're not suggesting any rate increase related to your water commodity rate. On sewer, it's a 3.9% increase every year for 5 years. Now, approving this doesn't mean you're locked into 3.9% every year for 5 years. The model's just saying if everything holds true, that's what you would have to do in order to pay your bills as they come due and maintain that calculated amount in the bank. For the debt charge, so 3 of your 4 bonds are going to be paid off in the next several years. Adding that $17 million new bond does not increase the debt charge. When all is said and done, we're actually suggesting a decrease to that debt charge of $3 and, I want to make sure I get it right. Yes, $3.57 per month. So when you combine that plus the 3.9% added to sewer with the freeze on water, the end result is really your typical residential customer their bill is going to go down this year by somewhere in the $1 to $3 per month ballpark. But in subsequent years, if we do have to do that 3.9% raise and everything else stays the same, they would see a $1 to $3 increase per month next year and the year after and the year after that. So in my mind, it's very good news that overall we're not seeing the 5 and 10% rate increases that I have to report at a lot of my clients. Your costs are very well contained. You are putting the appropriate resources into your infrastructure. And because you've done a good job of following the model for the last decade plus, you have raised rates when the math suggests that you should. And so to me, the $3.57 reduction and a very slight increase to the commodity rate is very good news. So where we go from here, we have a written report that goes along with the calculation, and we don't want to finalize that until we get some approval from council that, yes, you've agreed with the result of it. Otherwise, we'll have to amend. I know that's going to happen at some point. And then the change would go into effect. I'm not sure if you do it immediately or wait till the next budget year.
So usually it waits till the next budget year, but I was going to just interject just a little bit. So Brian, in his presentation, he's talked about the reissuance of $17 million in bonds. So this is something that we've talked about actually for the last couple of years, and those are to meet the infrastructure needs of both the aging water sewer lines, mains that are in the ground, as well as the equipment in both the water and the sewer plant. And so, you know, those are not just a couple $1,000s of expenditures, those are millions of dollars at a time. And so that's a need that needs to be met. We're not asking council to approve anything tonight. So we're presenting this just as information. I've talked with Mr. Price already and Lisa, and to give them more time to get acquainted or well-versed in this whole procedure and the need. This will either be on a February or a March agenda. It'll also give council time to consider it, to research a little bit, to ask additional questions so that you're well aware. But I thought that this presentation by Mr. Cam Miller was important tonight, just so that you knew what the study said when you commissioned the study or authorized it a few months back, and kind of where we were heading. So it's not really a question of, are there repairs that need to be done? We know there's repairs that need to be done. We have water and sewer mains that are 50 or 60 years old that are in the ground. And so we just know that those things need to be done. The question is, how do you pay for them? We don't think you pay for them through strictly the commodity rate. That would be a tremendous increase in that commodity rate. But this debt service charge through future bonding, we feel is the key. And that's something you'll get in the future. But because we haven't asked you to approve the $17 million in bond yet, that's something that will come in a future meeting. This is just information tonight.
Can I answer any questions?
Council.
I have a question, Madam President. I'm not sure if it's appropriate for you because it was actually in our last, our budget or our fiscal year audit. It talked about for our water, we have a lot of loss of water that we're not kind of finding until later on. Is there a way that if we kind of change some processes to find those quicker, would that help us a little bit?
So water loss is part of every system. No system is watertight. The question is how much, right? So it's not really a question of day-to-day or week-to-week process. It's all of these construction projects that need to happen to take a section of pipe that is a little leakier than we want it to be and replace it with something that's newer and will last. It can certainly be monitored on a closer basis. You can always, based on the technology and the system, I mean, you can do a lot to see what is happening at individual houses and so on. But I don't think you're doing anything wrong, or I'm not suggesting any procedural change.
Mr. Wendell?
To piggyback off of Amber's question to you, the water loss thing. Like, let's say it's all of a sudden a pipe bursts in the street, and you know how you see the water come bubbling up there. Now, is that considered water loss then? Because we don't know.
Yes, yep. So any water that is created at the plant and pushed through the system, if it doesn't eventually go into somebody's house through their water meter, then that's lost water. It's really the opportunity cost of operating the system.
Now, are fire hydrants considered a water loss system at all, or?
Usually any unmetered use of water.
Mr. Costello?
You bet, President. So, in your presentation here, it says, what happens if we do not increase rates? It says, over the next 5 years, the village current rates are not sufficient to pay for it, and it lists everything. And at the last sentence, it says, potentially the general fund could be needed to subsidize water and sewer. So that scared me a bit. So
Well, and it's supposed to. If it is. So the idea is you have to maintain the water and sewer system separately. And if you do not raise rates accordingly, and you're not taking care of the infrastructure needs, eventually this thing blows up in your face, and the only place that has money will be general fund. So it's, that situation will not happen as long as the village takes care of its business in water and sewer.
So, continuing with your presentation, the next thing says, don't compare to other communities. So what did I do? I compared to other communities, obviously. So, one of the ways, another community, I'll just use Grand Ledge, for instance. They have all sorts of different rates. They give senior, I don't know if it's them that give senior discounts, but some of them will do income testing. So if you're low income, you have a cheaper rate. And then what they'll also do is they'll charge a higher rate for people that are outside the township. Is that something that or outside their community, their city? Is that something that you can still use your algebra to figure out?
Yeah, so two parts there. The reason why we say don't compare yourself to other communities is because really these are all unique systems. Every community is different. The age of your infrastructure versus someone else's is different. The makeup, commercial versus residential, how many customers you have, all of those differences mean that you're never comparing apples to apples. So when I'm often asked, can you please benchmark us against similar communities in this part of Michigan? And I refuse, because that's creating a narrative that shouldn't exist. Your system's your system, and your costs are your costs. It doesn't matter what anyone else has done. So you've got to take care of yours based on your costs. Now, the fact is, I said it's more of an art than a science, because yes, every rate structure, not every, most rate structures, community to community to community, are going to be different. So in your case, you have this debt charge, and you have the two variable rates. Well, next door or two communities down, they might charge a readiness to serve charge, one for water, one for sewer. And that readiness to serve charge pays for some of the administration inherent in the system that has nothing to do with how much water a customer uses. It's not a better or worse system, it's just a different system. So when you say, well, this other community does a minimum charge, can we do that? Well, you can. The the problem with a minimum use charge, so that would be, I only used 2 units of water this month, but I'm gonna get charged for 5, because 5 is the minimum. That actually can get you in trouble legally because of the Bolt decision that says you can only charge people for what they use. So in that case, it's not, the Bolt decision is legal precedent, but it's not written into the law. So anytime I come across a community that does have some kind of minimum usage charge, I suggest that they consider changing their methodology, because I do feel that it's risky.
So with that, I guess, there are all sorts of ways we can base our base fees on our actual costs. So is there a way that we could investigate to see how we can potentially assess fees differently?
You certainly can. The problem is that unless there's something inherently wrong with what you're doing, and there's not, but like I say, when I go to these other communities, and there's a risk there that legally you might get sued over X, Y, and Z. I suggest a change so that that risk goes away. But when I go into a community that does not have that risk, I don't suggest looking at other ways of doing it, because anytime you make that change in your methodology, there are going to be customers that are better off, but there's also going to be customers that are worse off, because at the end of the day, you need the same amount of cash coming in, regardless of which of your customers is paying it. So you can look at, let's add a fix, let's do this, let's do that. Absolutely, you can, but if you do make that change, you're going to hurt as many people as you help.
Council?
I got a question.
Mr. Weinberg?
Jerry, what do we charge for a hookup? I mean, like these new homes where the water's going out now, and they hook up, do we charge a certain amount of money for a hookup to that house?
Yeah, we call those tap fees.
Okay.
And so we charge $3,000 for a water tap fee and $4,000 for a wastewater tap fee, a total of $7,000.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We appreciate your time and your research. I will entertain a motion to accept the water and sewer rates study. Pardon? Yeah, but I got my handy dandy, my list. Entertaining a motion.
I'll make the motion to accept the water and sewer rate study.
I'll second the motion.
Motion by Ryan, second by Wendell. Council discussion. Seeing none, oh.
I'll start it. I
Councilwoman Clark.
think that the study was great. I appreciate you being here. I think it's telling to show that as a village, we pay our bills and nobody likes to have to increase anything, but I appreciate you coming here and giving us that news. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Just for information, I guess, because I know a bunch of you guys are new, but we did have a presentation on these sewer lines and things for the DPW that we had to update, and it was a substantial amount of money, and clearly we're already working at a deficit, so to see a $1 to $3 increase per month, I think, is a fiscally responsible way for us to kind of attack these things. As was stated, there's a potential we have lead lines still in this village, so I think for us to take this head on is smart. And again, I appreciate your time.
Wendell?
As Amber was saying, I think, with doing the increase, $1 to $3 is smart, because I'm pretty sure as Mr. Costco could probably say that if we did lines before they broke, we wouldn't have to have the emergency after hours, Saturday or Sunday or whatever. It's being done, and then it's regular costs and everything else, instead of being exorbitant fees for having them work 20 hours trying to repair one line and then we had down to 5, we just did the whole line 3 days ago per se.
Council?
Is this just for, Madam President, is this just for the sewer rate?
This is just to accept the study. This isn't to make any changes at the moment.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay. And public comment. Not everyone at once. All right. Roll call vote, please.
Cascola.
Yes.
Kyer.
Yes.
Wendell.
Yes.
Ryan.
Yes.
Cole.
Yes.
Weinbrenner.
Yes.
Brandon.
Yes, motion carried. New business number 3, consideration of the approval of council action request for the village manager 2025 contract. Bye, Brian.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Yep, thank you.
Yes, thank you, President Brandon. So I want to say, just before we delve into this, I'm happy to be to this point in the agenda because it makes this official. So I actually called Mr. Price's cell phone today, and he said, "Hello, this is Timothy Price, Holly Village Manager." And I thought,
Good job, Mr. Price.
not yet, you're not. In fact, that was a message I left on his recorder. So after this, I told him I still had 5.5 hours left. So after you consider this with approval, it'll be official, so it'll be a good day. On December the 14th, council held interviews for the position of village manager upon my retirement. You interviewed 4 individuals on that date. You authorize a conditional offer of employment. Upon contacting Mr. Price, he did accept that conditional offer of employment. The standard background query was conducted both by the MML on Mr. Price's professional qualifications and resume entries that he made. And then Chief Narsh and I actually made the trip on a snowy day out to Grand Haven and talked to officials at the city of Grand Haven as well as business owners in the city. And I have to tell you, from a business perspective, and I'm sure our business owners will be the same way, could not have received more glowing remarks or comments about Mr. Price. So he completed that background with flying colors. And so then we continued on to the next stage, which is negotiation of a contract. And if you recall, council had directed that I have those contract negotiations with the candidate, with consultation from Attorney Gildner, and also with President Brandon. And so that is exactly what occurred. The professional services agreement that you have in your packet for Mr. Price is a 3-year agreement. It is at a salary of $116,000 as the starting salary. That is within the previously approved wage and salary guideline approved by the village council. It includes a $500 per month car allowance, a cell phone provided by the village, standard benefits that is provided to any full-time employee of the village, including health care, and a $2,000 moving allowance. So $2,000 moving allowance is something that the village has not done in the past, but I don't think that it's not reasonable. And I did confer with President Brandon before agreeing to that. And she did agree, before including that in the contract. So that really is the contract that you have in front of you. It's a standard contract, standard benefits, reviewed by the village attorney and agreed to at this point by Mr. Price, pending council approval.
One, possibly 2 amendments. Page 1, whereas Timothy Price was appointed to serve in the office of village manager for the village of Holly on January 14th, 2025, please, instead of 2024.
Good point.
And then, does that change page 2? Thereafter, each year beginning with July 1st, 2025, should that be 2026, a year and a half out, or should that remain 2025?
No, typically that's 2025.
Okay,
Yep.
just making sure. All right, so just with that one amendment in mind, so before we can get discussion going, I will entertain a motion. consider the approval for the village manager 2025 contract.
I make the motion to consider the village manager contract for 2025.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Wendell and a second by Ryan. Okay, council discussion.
Madam President, I just have a
Councilman Wendell.
weird question, I guess. I know that they have a $500 per month car allowance, and I know that Mr. Walker has one right now. Now, will Mr. Walker's get turned over to Mr. Price, or?
I would assume there's going to be some overlap, so I don't think that would be the appropriate way to word it, but let's turn it over to
I'm
these guys.
just,
So there will be some overlap, you're correct, because we're both employed in the month of January. And so in the month of January, you only have one car allowance check issued, because that's for the prior month of December, so that would be me. Then in the month of February, you'll have car allowances for the prior month of January, which will be both myself and Mr. Price. Just the single month, but it is budgeted throughout the year.
no,
for
I'm just saying, because I know the car you have is a lease, I think.
It is.
Now, is it your lease and we?
He thinks that you're gonna take his car.
No, I don't, no, please, no, I don't know if it's.
It is my lease.
It is not village.
That's what I want to know. I know the lease was village property or not.
Yeah,
It's in
no,
lieu
it
of
is,
a village.
it is my lease.
Okay, so when you go, it goes, and then if he wants to lease a Subaru, he can lease a Subaru, whatever he wants to.
I don't know why you'd want a Subaru,
I don't know, I'm just.
although that's what he currently drives.
I just said that, I don't know for sure. I'm just
I
making
don't
a
know.
comment.
This is a rough night for your start, isn't it?
You can't have Jerry's car.
But you can have a Subaru.
Yes, a Subaru.
Okay. Council.
Point of order first. The motion probably should have included the amended date.
No, that's true.
This contract as amended.
2025.
Mr. Walker, what did you say, please?
Just contract as amended. Yep. If both the maker and the person who seconded agrees to that amendment.
Yeah, I agree to, make the motion with the amended dates.
Second still.
There we go. Thank you. Council, any further discussion on this contract, or does everything look handy dandy? Okay, I let that awkward silence drag on long enough. Public comment. Let the record show that Richard Kinnaman is grinning slyly.
Is this time where I can say, see you, Jerry?
We still got for a couple more
Okay.
weeks.
I'm not smiling as much as.
Yeah. 9 more days.
I was gonna say.
Well then, seeing none and hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Kyle,
Yes.
Wendell,
Yes.
Ryan,
Yes.
Cole,
Yes.
Weinbrenner,
Yes.
Costello,
Yes.
Brandon.
Yes, motion carried.
Congratulations, Mr. Price. Congratulations, Mr. Price.
Welcome aboard.
We'll be nice to you, I promise. Not- Yep,
Okay, so where are we? That was number 3.
We're on 4.
So we are on number 4. Consideration of the approval of council action request for clerk treasurer Bigger to administer the oath of office to village manager Timothy Price. Oh, and village clerk treasurer Lisa Bone.
She cannot be here tonight, so it
Yes.
would only be to Mr. Price.
All right, so to Mr. Price it is, if you can both approach the podium? Or
I
just
think
right
Mr.
there?
Price is just gonna come around here.
Okay, there we
So
go.
that she has the microphone. Just come over.
Yep.
Ms. Bigger, you have the floor.
don't take it too far.
I need you to raise your right hand. Please repeat after me. I do solemnly swear or affirm
I do solemnly swear
or affirm
or affirm
that I will support the Constitution
that I will support the Constitution
of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution of this state,
and the Constitution of this state,
and that I will faithfully discharge
and I will faithfully discharge
the duties of the office
the duties of the office
which I am about to enter
which I'm about to enter
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Welcome to the Village of Holly,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Curtis.
Does anyone have any complaints for the new village manager?
Oh, don't worry.
Okay, do we need to make a motion on this? Mr. Walker?
No.
Point of clarification, Mr. Walker, will you be running the rest of the meeting as the village manager?
Well, I can in consultation with the new manager.
All right, perfect. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay. Item number, oh, and I'm sorry, did that need a motion?
He said no.
No.
No, okay. Item number 5, consideration of the approval of council action request to enter into a contract with Wolf House and Building Movers.
Yes, thank you, President Brandon and Council. So this is a project that has been in progress for well over 20 years, for a long period of time. Actually, Mr. Joe Mischler and Mr. Peter Stauffer are going to talk a little bit about the project as well as the need for this contract with Wolf Movers in order to take the next step in the relocation of the historic Holly Railroad Depot. So Mr. Mischler and Mr. Stauffer.
Come on up, Joe and Pete.
Uh-oh. He's got that folder here.
I only have a 95-page report. Joe Mischler, 620 Academy Road. Took you a while to get that. This is a great move. It's a critical move. We have met with Wolf Movers. I've met with them at least once. I know that Pete Stauffer, who is our project manager, we just appointed him toward the end of last year, and we're pushing this project forward. And having met with the company that you're dealing with, their contract, they have moved other buildings. And I think at this moment, the depot is just about ready to go in terms of the depot. And there are some other things that have to happen, like the foundation and the basement and all of that kind of stuff that all has to be considered. And they have to build is it a 75-foot ramp? Where they're going to bring the depot into the spot that it's going to be. Now, if you've been following this, you'll know that we have changed the location of the depot just a bit because we found out that on the National Registry, which the depot is on the National Registry since 2000, we have to keep it with the same orientation that it's at the present time. So however it's facing now, it has to face the same way. So we had it originally going almost parallel with Broad Street, but we had to shift that over because of the rules and regulations of the National Registry when it comes to historic buildings. And as Jerry said, this has been a project that started way back in 1998. There were two committees. There was a restoration committee, and they actually began, they did several things. First off, they straightened out the historic districts. Everybody thought the depot was in a historic district. Come to find out back then that it wasn't in a historic district. So that committee straightened that out. They got it on the National Registry. They applied for about over $300,000 worth of grants to begin the restoration on the building, and they put in a new roof, and they did a bunch of other things. They had a very good committee. Randy Redmond was on that committee, Greta Mackler,
Bill Whitmore. Whitmore is no longer with us, Mackler is no longer with us. That committee, they ran into some difficulties around 2006, and people died, people got sick, and you know how that works. And the committee sort of phased out. And then a new committee came in before COVID, but that committee was not, the primary issue with the second committee was moving the depot. And that has always been the primary concern of that committee. Richard's on the committee. Jeremy and Jerry Nash are on that committee. They're on that committee. And Brian is on it. I was getting there. I'm old and I'm slow. At any rate, so we have been meeting, and we decided late last year to get a project manager to give this a swift kick and move it forward. We have raised considerable sums. I know that this is quite a chunk of money. Not exactly, I don't have it in front of me, it's 270,000 or something like that. 276. Okay, so it's quite a chunk of money, but we have enough money to cover that and enough money to do the basement and the foundation and all that kind of stuff. So the first couple of phases of the project, once it's moved, then we'll begin looking at actually restoring it. And there have been a lot of suggestions. One of the things that was done by both committees is that the building is a public building. It will not be used by businesses or anything else. We left it for the community as a whole so that public could use it. There have been no decisions, as I know of, at this point, other than it's public, as to what goes in the building. And there's a lot of discussion, and I know there's discussion of, trying to keep it as historical as possible. The only really radical change is that when we prepared they prepared the building of the DPW, which did an outstanding job and has been doing an outstanding job, we had to remove the flooring. If you've been in the depot, you know what I'm talking about. They were 4x4 stones. They were not attached. They were not attached to any of the walls. And it would have been incredibly difficult to try to move all of that. So when they were removed, we preserved, I think, 4 squares, roughly 4 squares. And those squares were the ones where, like I'm standing here, if this is the ticket office, there were indentations in the floor where so many people had stood. We saved those. And those are going to hopefully go in the new building. So the big radical change would be, once it gets moved, it's not going to have the same kind of flooring. It's just not feasible. So, but this is a very critical step, and we appreciate your support. I handed out to everybody a timeline, and we're attempting to stick to that timeline. I know Peter Stauffer created the timeline, and we talked about it, and he said, hand that out. So, as the chair of the committee, I'm handing it out. So, it's kind of fluid because you never know what's going to happen. As you know, we've been dealing with the railroads. Anybody that's done with the railroads, with the village, you know what the problem is. We don't do anything in a hurry. Oh, wait a minute. Whoa, delay. Yeah, there we go. So, I'll be happy to answer any questions. I know you've been sitting here a long time. Anybody have any questions you'd like to ask about it?
Council? Mr. Wendell?
The moving company that we had, do they specialize, or you guys have, I should say, do they specialize in historical buildings?
Yes, they have moved several. I don't know how many buildings, but they have moved several. And they were very professional. The very first time I met them, we were inside the depot, and he explained how the building had to be shored up and what had to be removed and all that kind of stuff so that it could be done. So yes, they're very professional.
Because I know at the dedication for the groundbreaking, we got the tour going to the depot, and I did notice, and one thing I was surprised about, there's no load-bearing wall in It's all exterior.
That's a good point.
Brick shell.
Yeah.
I mean, just say, I was like, because they had, like you said, the pieces of the floor, and I was like, that's the floor that we should be in here.
It's set on the dirt and whatever was below it, that's what it's set on. There was nothing else.
The only supporting wall I think there was between the bathroom and the main rest of the area.
About it. And there is some trickiness to it in terms of moving it because of the closeness of the track that's on the Broad Street side. There's, I guess there's a couple rules. They can't hang over on it. They can't go over it or whatever, but that's just, that's something the company has to deal with, but he thought that could be done, and yeah, we'll move it.
So just a little bit of additional information, I think, that might assist council. So Wolf Movers, so they have moved several depots in and around the Midwest. They were identified, or originally we started discussions with them with Tom McKinney and prior building official Steve McGee. And it was relayed to Mr. McGee at the time that the proprietary system they use really is what allows them to be so successful. So as Mr. Mishler said, the contract price is $276,000. That's contained in the contract. In front of you, it's split up over 5 payments. All of the money for this contract, as well as any work associated with the move, has already been fundraised through either donations and or grants. So there is no tax dollars that is involved in this, in the actual financial portion of the move. To say that the village didn't participate at all, that wouldn't be true, because we know that our building official and our DPW has participated, but as far as cash into the project, it's all fundraised. There's a little over $700,000 and some change in a separate account for this project individually. So there is no problem. This is before council, not because we're using tax dollars, but because we're making such a large expenditure, and it is a village project.
If I could add just one thing. With the first committee, I'm trying to remember the exact amount, but the village did contribute. When the first committee was doing restoration, the village committed, I want to say it's around $70,000 or $80,000 over a period of 2 or 3 years. One of the reasons that committee failed or didn't get the job done was trying to get the water and sewer lines. And that was an expense that the village just could not eat back then. It was going to be astronomical. I can't remember what the sum was. It's in a lot of their minutes and stuff, so. But that's the only time the village has contributed money to it.
Madam President, one more question.
Go ahead, Mr. Wendell.
Who owns the property that it's going to be moved to?
We do.
The Village of Holly.
It's owned
We
by the
do.
Village of Holly.
Several years ago, we entered into negotiations with CSX, right? With CSX, and initially we were going after one piece of property, but there was another piece of property right next to it, and they were kind of tough in bargaining with, but we offered $25,000 for the one piece, right? And then there was another piece that was right next to it that was added on, I believe, for another $10,000. So for $35,000, which came out of the depot fund, we got those 2 pieces of property.
I just wanted to make sure we weren't moving it somewhere and then
No,
they say, oh, that's our
the
property.
village,
So-
we own that
Mr.
piece of,
Mishler.
we own those 2 pieces of property.
Who among your board will be responsible for the treasury and the payments?
For who?
Who's going to be responsible for the payments?
The village acts as a fiduciary through the treasurer's office.
Right.
Okay. Mr. Gildner, if the depot board was to have some surprise expenses, and it came down to they didn't have a payment when it was due, would it then be the village's responsibility to take over?
So the contract, as written, is with the village. So ultimately, the village would be on the hook if there are payments missed or defaults made.
Who has access to the funds currently that have been fundraised
Clerk treasurer,
from the village?
The village only.
right.
Okay.
She's done a great
Much
job for us.
clarifying. I appreciate it.
Yeah, but there is sufficient there is sufficient money unless some great disaster occurs, to move it and do all the understructure and get it in place. There's money available for all of that.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Mishler. Anyone else, council? Thank you so much, Joe. We appreciate your time and
My
your
pleasure.
research.
Can I do one other thing?
Of course.
Welcome to Holly. And welcome home and thank you for serving our country.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Okay. What number is this? This is number 5. I would entertain a motion to consider the approval of the action request to enter into a contract with Wolf House and Building Movers.
I'll make the motion to enter into a contract with Wolf House and Building Movers.
I'll second that motion.
Motion by Ryan, second by Weinbrenner. Council discussion.
I just want to reiterate, I appreciate what the committee has done, and thank you, Jerry, for clarifying that that is not taxpayer money that's coming from this move, that it is fundraising and grants.
Yes, correct.
And that it is already fully funded.
That it's fully funded, yes. Thank you.
Council? Public comment. Roll call vote, please.
Ryan,
Yes.
Cole,
Yes.
Weinbrenner,
Yes.
Haskala.
Yes.
Kyer,
Yes.
Wendell,
Yes.
Brandon.
Yes, motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Pete. I know you don't like the spotlight, but. Item number 6. Consideration of the approval of council action request to hire road professional services to complete the capital improvement plan.
Yes, thank you, President Brandon and Council. So for several months, the Planning Commission has been working on the creation of a capital improvement plan. I think that's something that council has wanted and staff has been working on it. We're at a point now to where it needs some technical expertise and really a push over that finish line. In discussions with Rowe Professional Services, who has already provided some assistance, they have provided the attached contract, which should allow for the completion of the capital improvement plan, and it will also involve some community meetings with the community, but it will finish up this project. The cost of this proposal is $5,000.
To enter into discussion, I will entertain a motion by council to approve the action request to hire Rose Services to complete the capital improvement plan.
Motion to approval of council action request to hire Rowe Professional Services to complete the capital improvement plan.
I'll second the motion, sir.
Motion by Koskela, second by Wendell. Council discussion.
I have a question, if it's supposed to take 6 months or 3 months, because in the letter it mentions 6, but in the timeline, there's only 3 months.
Our goal is to have it completed by the July council meeting.
My other thing, this was completed by Rowe, the letter and the timeline? Because it multiple times here mentions us as the township and not the village. So,
Okay, yeah.
Council?
Madam President.
Mr. Koskela.
Thank you. So being on Planning Commission, I've had the opportunity to work with Roe and the individual who wrote this up, who's called Alex. He's good luck with his last name. And I think they've been proficient in providing good guidance for us.
Thank you for that input. Anyone else?
I just appreciate the time that you guys on the planning commission have put into this.
Okay, public comment. Roll call vote, please.
Weinbrenner,
Yes.
Haskala,
Yes.
Kyer,
Yes.
Wendell,
Yes.
Ryan,
Yes.
Cole. Yes. Brandon.
Yes, motion carried. Consideration of the approval, council action request for a fireworks fundraising event.
Yes, thank you, President Braden and council. So in December, council did approve a contract with Ace Pyrotechnics to conduct fireworks over the next couple of years. At that meeting, we talked about the need for a committee in the future and that we would put that on this agenda. I think personally that the committee needs to be a committee comprised of different individuals from the various commissions. In my own mind, if I were to form the committee, I would have a member of council, a member of parks, a member of the DDA, a member of the staff, and then of course, if anybody from the public were willing to participate, it would be welcomed. But I think it's important to have somebody from each of those separate commissions, boards, or staff, because there's different functions within that committee. So part of the fireworks events occurs in the park. Makes sense that the parks would be involved. The Holidays event occurs in the DDA district. And then, of course, I think staff has to be involved, just because of the logistics of getting out the notices, doing the fundraising, coordinating some of the staff help. I mean, even with the fundraising committee, the event is impossible to be conducted without assistance from the police, the fire, the DPW. And so that's why staff involvement is important. And so I would just lay that out, and really, my request is that you would approve this approach, because you'll need to, because right now, for the last 13 years, we have not used tax dollars, which I think is very appropriate. It's a community event, the community funds the event. I think it brings people into the community that also support our businesses and the village as a whole later on. But for right now, I mean, it's really up to the council how you form this committee. If you want to have one member that wants to volunteer, or if somebody's appointed, and then I would take it to each of the individual commissions that I've listed and ask for that same cooperation in order to make this a successful event.
For clarity, this has to be an ad hoc committee by the nature of it?
Yeah, it would not be a council committee.
Okay.
Can I recommend that we do 2 members from each board? Just in case somebody can't make it to a meeting, right? And then you don't have parks out of the loop, or DDA out of the loop, or staff out of the loop. That would be my recommendation, is 2 from each. We talked about this at our last parks meeting, and we have 2 members that are interested in serving on this committee.
Who are they?
Sarah McCanny and then Jane DeSessa.
Does she know that? Do they know that? Do they know they're interested?
Yes.
Sarah and Jane?
Yes.
Okay. Is anyone from council interested? I'm not. This is not my wheelhouse. I don't know how to fundraise. Kyer, anyone else?
I would be more than happy to assist Kyer.
Okay. Anyone from the public interested?
Come on, Richard. You don't do enough.
Okay.
I think I see Chief over there raise his hand.
So it looks like we're off to a start. Mr. Price? Okay. All right, so far we have Sarah Jane. We have DeSessa, McKinney, Kyer, Wendell, and Price. Does this need to be? I'm not volunteering them for anything. They are free to volunteer on their own time without the pressure of the public's eye on them.
Yeah. Although I would say this, fire and police, while they don't volunteer for fundraising, they are there all day long on the day of both events. So, and the chief is there for free. Chiefs are there for free on their day off.
Like I said, we're cheap, but I'll nominate the three of us if you need us for anything. Since I'm the only one back.
Since I'm the only one back.
A point of clarification, Mr. Walker. I know we have a down payment to make for these fireworks. Do we have that down payment yet, or are we starting out from scratch?
So I believe we have, if we don't have the whole down payment, we're very close. You're not starting out in the negative.
Okay.
Good to know.
Madam President,
Yes.
who has run the committee, who has done fundraising previously? Who's been?
It was staff, right? Yeah. So, okay.
So it sounds to me like you have a committee. I don't think there's any other formal action that needs to be required. Perhaps at the next DDA meeting, Mrs. Stauffer can present it to her board.
Yes. Should we do a motion to show council support for this?
Yes, I think that would be appropriate.
I will entertain a motion to approve the action request for a fireworks fundraising committee.
I will make the motion to approve the formation of a fundraising committee for the July 4th fireworks and holiday celebration.
I will second that motion.
It's actually July 3rd.
Motion by Kyer, second by Cole. Any further council discussion? Any public comment? Roll call vote, please.
Cascola.
Yes.
Kyer.
Yes.
Wendell.
Yes.
Ryan.
Yes.
Cole.
Yes.
Weinbrenner.
Yes.
Brandon.
Yes, motion carried. Reports, please, staff.
Yes, thank you. So we've made light a little bit about this being my last meeting and about my being retired.
We don't like
But in all seriousness, let me say that I came to the village in 2010. At that time, on a 90-day emergency contract, the village had contacted me, wanted to know if I could come for just 90 days and assist, and obviously I never left, because the village is a special, magical place. And while like other places, we have our challenges and our issues, above all, in the end, we're family and we pull together and we work for the same goals. So it has been my pleasure to serve not only this council, but all of the prior councils and village presidents that I've worked for and for the residents in the village of Holly. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Any other staff reports? Okay. Ms. Cole?
Wow, what a meeting. Especially as your first one. But thank you, Jerry. Like you said, you came on for 90 days and here you've been. We appreciate your service. Thank you for being here. Mr. Price, welcome aboard. Welcome to Holly. It's great to have you and your family. We appreciate you stepping up. Thanks, guys.
Mr. Wendell?
Like I'd like to say, thank you, Jerry, for being the village president for millions and millions of years. And to you, Ms. Bigger, thank you for being the clerk treasurer. It's going to be sad to see you guys go, but like everything needs to be in changes and everything else. I did have a meeting last week for the first time with the HDC, the Historical District Committee, or Commission. And we had a presentation done by the State of Michigan, or not State of Michigan, Oakland County Register of Historical Buildings, stuff like that, to help us learn and understand it better. They're outlining our historical boundaries more. It's actually right now in Lansing. I can't remember the exact name of what the thing is, it's abbreviation for it, but once that gets approved, it's gonna be sent down to us for final yes, yay or nay. And, I just have, two council comment one is like Mr. Taylor had stated about was the traffic. I got stuck on that this morning. And I was actually really, really surprised that everybody just waiting to turn left into the school. And I believe I wrote either you or Mr. Walker on it before about it, and they went to the appropriate facilities, but I just think it needs to be something because it's getting to the point where I'm seeing people flying down the shoulder, either to turn onto Quick Road or fly past everybody, and in the afternoon, I know a lot of kids do go across the street to McDonald's and everything else, and that's like, there's no crossing guard, there's no light, there's no nothing. And if there's just a line of traffic there goes, some kids now just became a speed bump. And I wouldn't wanna see that happen. If there's a way that we could prevent that, to be proactive instead of reactive.
Thank you, Mr. Wendell.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Kyer.
Yes, Parks met last week. Again, we talked about this fundraising committee, and just because none of you are on it does not mean that you are not going to be volunteered to help.
Well, I hear Hillary is a great volunteer runner, so.
Yes, she is. Yes, she is. And that was basically all we talked about. Again, just in the middle of budgeting for upcoming projects. We got a couple things in the works, and that's about it from Parks.
Thank you. Mr. Ryan.
I have nothing at this time.
Weinbrenner.
Yes, I like Debbie, it's been a pleasure all these years, working with you and stuff, knowing you. Jerry, I'm sorry I took your job at the police department, and you always bring this up all the time, so I thought I'd bring it up tonight before you left.
Yeah, for those of you that don't
People
know, when I was 18 years old, I applied to the police department, and they were in fact going to hire. They made a job offer to me until this guy from Grand Blanc came down and took my job.
In Walt Lake? In Walt Lake?
No, here in Holly.
In Holly?
Jerry, that's where Jerry started his career, was in Holly.
But it's been an honor to know you, Jerry, and talking with you and everything.
Thank you very much. I feel the same.
Koskila.
Thank you, Madam President. So last meeting, there was a citizen came in and talked to us about the cells being down, the police holding cells. So, and that kind of upset me hearing that. So the reason I live in the village and not a mile outside of the village is if I call the police, I want someone to show up quickly. And I want that to be taken care of. So hearing that we had a problem with our cells, well, maybe we're not safe. Maybe they can't arrest people. So I did some calling around to other communities, and come to find out other communities just don't have no holding cells at all. So it seemed like it was not, maybe overreaction almost, because with the cells being down, we have other communities in Oakland County that don't even have cells. So I think I was a little relieved seeing that.
And arrests are still happening.
Arrests will happen, yeah, so.
Where do they go?
That's right, that's a great question. So they said, and I asked that same question, I said, well, what do you do if you have to detain someone? Well, we can detain and investigate, and then, if they do need to be booked, they take them to Oakland County.
Oh, thank you.
So, and is the traffic, what has changed at the traffic at the middle school? Middle school is not a new thing.
Well, right now, the buses are each taking 1 week off throughout the year, and so the kids, those kids that have the week off have to carpool in and
I
ride.
see, okay.
I think another,
Sir?
if I can answer that, I think another thing is that they changed the whole parking lot up there, going in and out, and how they got it, how it's situated
Okay.
up there.
Is it something that it can be improved upon at all?
I don't know.
No?
purview?
So we don't have control over what they do on their own property as far as how they configure their parking lot. As President Brandon said, I think the major change has been the elimination of bus routes and the need of parents to drive. I mean, certainly we can relay the concerns to the school district, but I mean, the shortage of bus drivers, I mean, I think it only allows them to do what they can do as far as providing transportation.
As far as police actions go, we have jurisdiction to direct traffic, how we want to direct traffic, be my understanding.
Well, we do have officers up there.
But, may I intervene?
Well, no, actually, we're gonna go ahead and let Jerry finish talking.
No, I was gonna say, we do have officers up there that monitor the situation and take action when appropriate, but, I mean, there's nothing illegal about somebody waiting to turn into the school. There is something illegal about a car, you know, using the shoulder to pass all the other vehicles, and I think, you know, it's the officer, you know, they take appropriate action as they deem necessary.
So this is just the overflow is what it is, we're managing what we can, and there's just a lot of cars.
I would say for right now, unfortunately, with the circumstances as they are.
Mr. Narsh, I saw your hand up.
Yeah.
I didn't wanna not.
Put a timer on him, Pro Tem. I'm kidding.
We're gonna give you 3 minutes.
So in answer to both public questions, because it is a concern, so for the past year and a half, actually, our SRO officers have been meeting with staff and the principals of the school. So some of the issues involved are the structure, the layout of the parking lot. They do not have any funding allocated to change that. So one of my SRO officers actually kind of reconfigured how he would loop the cars and and he's 6'8", so he gets everybody's attention when he puts his hat on, so Officer Hauk. And so he reconfigured some loops, tried some different things, and it was hard to get people to follow that, but it did alleviate some of it. The other thing is schools cannot spend a dime of money offside the campus. So when they have sinking fund dollars, those have to be spent only on the school property. They can't spend it on an increased shoulder or anything like that. So all of the roadway function would be a cost to the village. So if you wanted to do those improvements, there'll be zero school dollars to assist that. The move, of course, to the new location will change that. The role of that building will change. The other factor that's in there, and this has just been a factor for years, is more and more parents are driving kids to school, and I think part of that is a threat environment. There's different fears and comfort to taking their kids instead of using public transportation. So I say this out to everybody listening. If you put your kids on a bus, we'll have less traffic on the road. So we have more and more parents dropping off and picking up kids. That's not illegal. There's really, it's a unmovable object, a stoppable object moving towards a wall that can't be broken. So it's hopefully going to be redesigned a little better with the new building. They know that now, so in the redesign of the property, it'll hopefully be better.
Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
Okay, Mr. Cascella?
Still me.
Maybe, I don't know.
So it was also concerning to talk about public safety, seeing our ladder truck being down. So that sounds like it's gonna be another fun thing for us. And the last, two last things. For the water update, could we set something up so we can investigate how we raise rates or how we set rates or anything like that instead of, we know our community the best. And I think we live here, we know our neighbors and everything like that, so not just strictly rely on an algebra function in a spreadsheet.
Yes, I actually had a note over here. I'd like to send the Water and Sewer Fund topic to a subcommittee. What subcommittee might be appropriate for that, to talk about rates?
Either Public Works or Finance.
Just to kind of get a feel from the input without a motion or anything, just what does council think? Public Works or Finance? Does anyone have a strong opinion one way or the other?
Finance, I think you want people on there who are smart about money.
I'm seeing
agree.
Mrs. Loudon, I'm seeing some nodding.
Finance, I think.
Mrs. Nodding. Okay, I'd like to send this topic to Mr. Price. I'd like to send this topic to the Finance Committee to discuss water and sewer fund. Tap-in fees, hookups, rates, all of the relevant ways that we pay for our service. Okay, Mr. Cascella?
Last item for sure. So, the chiefs do a great job listing out all the calls and everything else we do. The only item that I don't believe is reported is, enforcement actions for code violations. Is that something that we can log and have reported?
The answer is yes.
Okay.
Is it already logged or recorded anywhere that we're just unaware of?
Yes, so they pull calls for service numbers in their Clemis system, so it'll be a Clemis report.
Can we get an itinerized something to view?
You will get something to do, yes.
Mr. Costello? Okay, all right, it's my turn. So, Tim Taylor, I hope that your questions were answered. Amy Ray, in regards to pipes, Mr. Walker, when we have a sudden expenditure that's of an emergency situation, what's the process?
So, the pipe plumbing issue that we had in the building here, where there was a plumbing failure, the current cost of that failure is about $6,000 for the repair and the remediation. There's going to be some restoration costs. So in the budgets for the various departments and the village as a whole, we have funds for those type of projects called building and grounds, or just other maintenance funds within the departments. So with this particular project, it will initially be carried in a building and grounds expenditure. If we get close to surpassing the budgeted amount, or sometime before the expiration of this budget, then we would come to council and say, we had budgeted, I'll just make a number, $20,000. Because of this building problem, we are going to be $6,000 over. We would like to amend that budget. Now, in this particular case, we will be making an insurance claim because it's property damage. So it is still going to show an expenditure that may be over the budgeted amount previously approved by council. And so that will need a budget amendment, but it's also going to show the corresponding reimbursement from insurance into the revenue line. So it is possible to have overages in expenditures, but you'll also have more than projected in revenues from insurance. So yes, I mean, in every case, when we expend money, it has to come from a certain line. If it is going to overshoot the previously approved council amount, then we would come to council for budget amendment for that line.
But we're never frozen in action, so if our pipes are frozen and they're bursting and they're leaking everywhere, you don't have to sit around and wait for the next meeting.
No, that's correct.
I have just a quick question on that too. Was any of the work done on this building warranted, for instance, like our roof or anything like that? Is there?
So, yeah, there are portions of it that are. This particular failure, I mean, it's something that, that we're going to talk with the builder about. It really wasn't a workmanship failure, I don't think. If anybody's familiar, it's a shark bite.
Okay.
That came loose on a plumbing fixture, which I hate that particular use of that because of dependability. But that's what it was. It was a shark bite that came loose that caused the flood.
Okay. I'd like to check up on the flagpoles at police and fire on request of Councilman Weinberger.
They were taken care of.
Okay, thank you so much. And can we get an update on the parking proposal? I think if I remember right, there was a meeting Monday morning.
Yes, so Chief Narch presented at a meeting with the DDA business owners in the downtown on a proposed parking proposal. There was a good number of attendees. He is going to conduct a second meeting so that it becomes more available to the public. And then after that, a public presentation will be made to the council.
Perfect, thank you so much. Then we don't need to crack into any of that tonight. Okay, back over here to my list. There were some concerns from the public about Grange Hall and Saginaw North with pedestrian danger factors due to the speed limit and the lack of illumination. This is all being handled as a new lane is being put in over the course of the summer, and the business that's opening up will also address the issues of nighttime illumination. For updates on Falk Road and local lake contaminations, you can view that evaluation on the Holly website. DDA, there is going to be a swing dance project coming soon downtown. That'll be on, we're gonna have our first one, well, just to try out one to start with, on the second Friday of, do you know what month it might start in?
I believe it was April.
Okay, we think April, the second Friday, but keep your eyes open for that. The depot was talking about looking into more grants. Tarina Greenway from Luna's was backed by the DDA and myself, so I will be having her on the agenda for next month if you would like to go and introduce yourself to Tarina at Luna's in downtown Holly. And we are still seeking a DDA director, but I think you've got some potential meet and greets coming up. Okay. And finally, I would like to send condolences to Jerry Walker and Chief Narsh for the loss of their mothers, to Nancy Rebar for the loss of her husband, to Jane McKenney for the loss of her husband. May Etta, Carol, Brad, and Thomas rest in peace. This meeting is dismissed.
Madam President, before we dismiss the meeting fully,
I already did.
Too late.
I'll just bring it back.